Well, you guys ask and I respond. We did a video a while back about 10 things that I bought from the thrift store, and a lot of you requested more of that type of video, and more importantly, how I use lots of those things in the garden. So I've got 10 more for you today. We're going to walk about the garden, and I'm going to show you how I put some of those really treasured finds to use. So number one are my britches. So Stuart laughed and said I looked like the Terminator girl or Commando or whatever it was. What was it called, Stuart? The Tomb Raider? Anyhow, I was looking for some really utilitarian kinds of pants that I could wear out in the garden. I looked at Duluth Trading, I looked at some more high-end kind of places, and then I thought, well, before I invest, I'm just going to go to Goodwill and look. And lo and behold, I found some of these pants at Goodwill. They have all sorts of little slots and pockets where I can put garden tools. I love them. They're great, they're tough, and they work just brilliantly for me in the garden. Another thing that I look for, if that is number one, then this is number two, and that is always look for something that you don't have to buy new, but that you might need. So this is just a beaten up old plastic stepping stool. Now, whenever possible, I try to avoid buying new plastic things unless it's something that's really unique. So something like this that is functional, that I need to buy, I can get for mere pennies at the thrift store or at the junk store, and it serves the same purpose as if it were brand new. Plus, this one's really dirty, so I can keep it back here in the flower bed, and that kind of hides it. Well, number three, you guys know I am constantly waging war against those pesky squirrels. They get in, they mess up the potted bulbs that I have. If I've just planted broadcast some lettuce seeds and they've germinated, they'll go in there and dig them all up, and it causes me no end of frustration. So here are a couple of solutions. Now, this one is a chicken wire cloche. I got this off of Gardener Supply, and I can put it over this pot of bulbs that I've got here. So, keeping that in mind, when I went to the thrift store, I found this just kind of metal basket. I have no idea what its original purpose was, but I have used it for so many different things. Number one, I can turn it on its side in the potager, I guess upside down rather, in the potager, and that protects the soil and keeps it basically just unpenetratable so that the squirrels can't get through that grid and rough up the soil. So that's one purpose for it. I can also use it, I have been known to set it on two tree stumps like this and use it as a small table. I can keep topiaries in it. I can carry things from one place to another. I find it really invaluable, and I love the fact that it's got this kind of rusty vibe. So that would be my number three thrift store find and how I use it in the garden. Well, you guys know I'm topiary obsessed, so it's pretty obvious that whenever I go to the thrift store, I'm looking for anything topiary related or that I can create a topiary out of. So for instant topiary, there is no better find than something like this. This was just an old wreath form. Whatever was growing on it obviously died. The person took that dead foliage off and then recycled this at the thrift store. And then what I did was I just took some old vines and things that were growing in the garden. Actually, they weren't old when I clipped them, but they were still malleable. I wrapped them around the form to give it kind of a rustic vibe, and then all I have to do is just plant something and I have an instant topiary. So look for topiary forms when you're at the thrift store. Well, nasturtiums, anyone? Anytime I go to the thrift store, this would be my, is this number 6, Stuart? I think it's number 6. I'm always looking for things that I can put tiny pots in because I love the look of these tiny little terracotta pots. So when I saw this wrought iron, I guess it's a muffin pan or maybe a pan that you make madeleines out of. Whatever it is, it's a piece of cookware, and it perfectly holds these tiny little terracotta pots. So I thought it would be really fun to use it as kind of a tray. And I'm putting all of my tiny terracotta pots in here. And then what I did was I just hydrated some peat pellets, and I dropped these moistened peat pellets. Boy, I'm having trouble working my mouth today, and it's not even cold out, Stuart. I put one of these peat pellets into these tiny pots, and then I've been soaking some nasturtium seeds. So then I just put a nasturtium seed in each one of these peat pots. And by the way, if you don't have a peat pot, then you can make one yourself out of a toilet paper roll and some seed starting mix. Now you may ask, why am I not planting them directly into the tiny little terracotta pots? And that's because nasturtiums really don't like to be disrupted and moved from one place to another. And I can't plant the pot, but I can just turn it upside down, take the little self-contained peat pot and drop it into the ground. Plus, I think it will be fun to see all of these little nasturtiums starting to go to seed and germinate in my little muffin pan. Well, in my last thrifting video, I talked about my affection for pillar candle holders, whether they're at the dollar store or you can find them at a thrift store. Well, here's another use for them. At my Goodwill store recently, I found one of these spent hanging baskets, the kind that you put a coir liner in. Normally there's a chain on it. Well, this one was obviously past its prime. But what you can do is find one of those pillar candle holders, preferably one with a stake, and then you basically just put that hole through the stake, and voila, you have a chalice planter. Basically taking trash and making treasure out of it. It's easy, it's cheap, it's inexpensive, and again, I just really like the aged patina of it. So that would be number 7. Now for number 8, I'm really excited to show you this one. I saw this really old, it's got kind of a Mexican curio store vibe to it. It's wooden, it's probably, I don't know what it is, maybe oak or something. And it even still had the sticker on the bottom, and I was right. It's got Kerr's Curios from Mexico. It was originally $8.98, but I got it for mere pennies, I think maybe $1.91 at the Goodwill store. But Stuart, if you can show them, you can see it's got these sweet little daisy motifs on them. So what I'm going to do, it would be fine in this condition, I guess. It's very dusty, so I'd want to give it a good cleaning first. But what I'm going to do is transform it via some spray paint that simulates stone. So I think it will look a lot more expensive. It might look a little bit maybe French country or Italian country, and I think that'll be really fun. I've got 2 different colors, so once I get that done, I will show you what it looks like and where I'll be using it in the garden. So that would be my number 8. Find a beautiful fancy candelabra to use out in your garden. Now, I just want you guys to know that I really suffer to serve you because Stuart has been mercilessly making fun of me today. He was just a minute ago going, "Oh, Linda, you're so creative." You know, what can I say? He makes fun of me just like my sons do. So this is number 9. I love this tip. And by the way, you guys, you can find these things at thrift stores, secondhand stores, garage sales, estate sales. But also I encourage you to shop your garage or shop your basement or shop your attic, places where you think that you've got stuff that is really just trashy and has no other purpose. And I challenge you to come up with some kind of creative metamorphosis of something that you can transform one thing into something else. Okay, so these I got at Goodwill last year, and they're just probably pillar candle holders. They come with this little hook. I have used these so many places, you guys. Right now I've got it hanging on this lattice work, and I can illuminate kind of a dark place back behind on the fence, but I've also hung them at the entrance to the potager. There's different things you can do with them. I like using these, what's the company of this? Stuart, what's the company of this? I can't remember, but I will make sure that I put a link below. I'm having all sorts of brain lapses today, but they're one of these solar powered lanterns. And I can put them on here and it illuminates this dark space, but I can also use battery operated candles back here. I can use real candles. I could put small pots on here with some blooming flowers. I can use these in a myriad of ways. Sometimes I'll find that my husband has put a little bit of birdseed in here because he likes to see the birds light on this and he can watch them. So something like this, which seems kind of meh, has a myriad of uses. And I'm so proud of myself because I finally remembered these are made by Sonnenglas. Stuart is laughing at me again, and I'll put a link below. And finally, number 10. You guys know how I love gravel, and what I also love is finding some kind of scoop for the gravel that I can find at the thrift store. This one is actually really good looking. It was, I think, a piece of maybe copper cookware or something from a long time ago. It's got heft to it, but because it's so sturdy and there is great reliability where the handle meets the bowl, it is perfect for scooping gravel. But wait, subscribe now and you get a bonus tip, something that you can find at the thrift store. This is actually a gift thrift, or a thrift gift from my friend Roger that you guys have seen before. He got this at an estate sale, and it's just wonderful. It makes a perfect garden trug for anything. I could plant in it, I could put garden tools in it, I can use it to transport little six-packs from one place to another. I just love the way it looks. I've even used it on a tablescape with overflowing with all sorts of baguettes and different kinds of breads when I was entertaining. So there is your bonus thrift tip number 11, some kind of wired garden trug.
And 3, 2, 1, action.
Aren't these baskets great? I got them at my local Goodwill store, though truth be told, I probably would have bought them if I found them at a home goods store. But I love the fact that they are reused, recycled, repurposed, and they cost practically nothing. They all coordinate with one another. I probably got them at separate times, but nevertheless, I love these baskets and I use them all the time. So I thought it might be kind of fun to go through my top 10 or so things that I like to look for at secondhand stores, at Goodwill stores, at Salvation Army stores, anything like that. And I do it for a number of different reasons. One, I love that I'm being a good steward of the earth, that I'm reusing, recycling, repurposing things that were previously loved and now I am loving them again. The other reason I like it is because they all already have kind of an aged patina, and I am definitely down in the record books as somebody who likes things that are a little bit aged, a little bit worn around the edges, and that have that well-loved, well-used look about them. I also like it because sometimes these are just the little bips and bops and extra things that I need for my garden or for my house that I can't find anywhere else. And then lastly, because they really get my creative juices flowing. I come up with ideas when I see something that doesn't necessarily have a purpose, but then I can kind of overlay a purpose onto them. And I'll give you a couple of examples. So I started out with my baskets. Baskets are something that I always am looking for at Goodwill, and I have found some really wonderful ones. Quite a number of them that you see hanging on tree limbs and things like that in my backyard are ones that were thrifted. I don't mind them being outside. If they age and decompose, that's okay, because I can just recycle them in the compost pile. They weren't expensive to begin with, and I like the look that they give the garden, even after they start to age a little bit. Something else, also plant related, that I always look for at Goodwill or my secondhand stores. Any kind of saucers. By the way, all of these things on the table I got at a secondhand store or a thrift store, with the exception of these lemon cypress. So these are little coasters. I got these at Goodwill. Whoops. And I didn't even break it. But I like these because they're crystal. They look great on my bar. And if I do drop them, if I do break them, it is not such a loss because they're not that precious to begin with. I also got them because they would make dainty little saucers for tiny little plants if I wanted to do something that was an elevated tablescape or something where I had individual blooms or individual pots at each place setting. I also like just basic utilitarian saucers. Now, why? Well, I always have saucers underneath all of my potted plants, and I like the saucers to match when I am kind of staging them inside. So if I have 4 terracotta pots, I then have 4 matching saucers that all look alike. They look harmonious, they match, and they're also doing double duty, protecting the surfaces of my wood tables or whatever. So I'm also always on the lookout for that. Probably the most frequently asked thing you guys inquire about are all of my plant stands, my metal plant stands. Now, in general, anything that is metal I look for at the junk store, because I can a lot of times come up with some kind of utilitarian function for them, like this. Now, I don't know what was in this initially, but I love the fact that it is a perfect plant stand for this potted lemon cypress. And what this can do is kind of give layering, staging, and various elevations in my garden and on my tablescapes inside. The other thing that they're good for is if I'm putting out a buffet and I want, say, a platter of something or a bread basket up here, and then I want another basket down here, they can elevate an element in my tableau or in my tablescape that then gives more visual interest to the table itself. So I like them for that reason, for so many reasons. Here is this one right here. I have tiny ones, I have larger ones that I have large potted plants on that I set out in the garden. I am always on the lookout for these. Sometimes I regret telling you about it because recently I haven't been able to find too many of them. I think you guys are now going and scouring some of my same sources. Another great way to elevate a plant, or really anything, is an old columnar candlestick. This one is metal. I often use it as a centerpiece on my table outside. It was, and all of these, I should give you price points on all of these things. And I would say most of them range from 50 cents up to a high of maybe $5. I seldom ever spend anything more than $3 to $5 on something, unless it's a jacket or a clothing item. But metal candlesticks, columnar candlesticks of any sort are great. Here's one that is wooden, and I buy them not so much to use as candle holders, but I buy them to just elevate things, because that increases the stature and importance of almost anything that you place upon it. So I like that, and because I love layering and, as I said earlier, visual interest. Now here's a unique one. This was just, Stuart, if you could show them, this was just what at once I'm sure was pristine and a galvanized metal candle holder where you would put columnar candles on each one of these various levels. But what I have used it for in the past, and it doesn't bother me a bit that it is rusty and old looking, but what I've used them for I've used these when I'm outdoor entertaining or having a garden party, that I can put, because the stake that holds the columnar candle in place will also secure and support these tiny little pots. I can then put succulents in all of these and have a little staging or a little theater for succulents. I could put spring blooms and have an assortment of pansies and violas in here. And then when my guests leave, they can each take their own individual little pot. It makes a nice display, and I just like the way it looks. And it can also obviously be used as a candle holder if I so choose. I always look for ceramics, cash pose, glass, clear glass in general, because you never know when they can be reused and repurposed for another function. So for example, I sometimes will find an interesting glass piece that I'll use as a cloche in the garden. I can use it as a clear vase. It might just be a great big jar or something. This cachepot is really beautiful. I don't know if it was originally very expensive, but I will probably be displaying some white tulips in it a little bit later. I've used it for fern, I've used it for hellebores. I obviously have probably used it for amaryllis, and I got this for a couple dollars at the Goodwill store. And then I have kind of a thing for both pitchers and bowls, shallow bowls. So I'm always looking for these kinds of things. Now you might say, well, how much of that junk do you really need in your house? Well, I don't need a lot of it, but I have certain special pieces that I like. Even Goodwill finds can be really special to you and prized. But what I also like to do with these kinds of things is use them for gift giving. So I can make some brownies or some cookies. I can package them up in one of these saucers and give it to someone for whom this color palette might resonate. There are so many of you blue and white lovers out there. I could put some granola in here. I could package really basically anything, put it in here and give it as a gift. And I like the idea of that. It makes it seem a little bit more special. Soaps, anything like that would be a really beautiful gift idea, I think. I've told you many, many times that a lot of the t-shirts that you guys ask, where did I get them? I get them from secondhand stores. Now my favorite place to do that is probably a secondhand store in Salida, Colorado called Free the Monkey, but I will look just about anywhere, and I get a lot of the t-shirts that you see me wearing in the garden. So I don't have to worry about them getting dirty, about them getting mucked up. I might put a hole in them. I don't really care. This is probably my favorite one. It really speaks to gardening, and it has dragonflies and things. And yes, I can tell, I got this one in Colorado because it's got Rocky Mountain Biological Laboratory on the back. So it not only serves a fashion function and a practical function in the garden, but also it's a nice little memory clediment that reminds me of some place that I've been. Something else I always look for are things that in my house get broken over and over again. I have 3 men in my house, 4 if you count Stuart, my photographer. And we're always breaking things. And I am of the opinion that nothing is so precious that you should really worry about it breaking. That's why I like to use all of my things. And this is an example. My husband's very favorite mugs are these stoneware mugs. And let me see, what were these? Rego mugs, but he likes them because they really hold the heat. I had 4 of them. They came as a complete set from Goodwill. He has already broken a couple of them or they've gotten lost in his car, but nevertheless, if I want to go back and get more all white mugs, which is generally what I use, then I will just go to the Goodwill store because they all match in color, if not in pattern. So that's a great idea. I love, as I said, anything that is kind of a shallow round container. This one is really interesting to me. It's probably just a silver plate dish. I love and I look for anything that's silver plated. This one I often use with tufts of moss at Christmas time or in the spring. I love that look. I will sometimes put maybe nuts or something like that in and use it as an hors d'oeuvre bowl. I can set another glass bowl inside of it. I just like the way it looks. I also like to use lots of silver coated trays, those kind of fancy trays. I use those a lot, and I use them to display my topiaries and things, again, because I like the way it looks. It doesn't bother me that they are old and they need to be buffed and shined. I like them with that kind of aged, sometimes coppery patina look that they get. They're great for topiaries, and again, they protect the surfaces. Along the lines of anything that's metal, if I just find anything that's kind of interesting, especially if it's got kind of an exotic feel. This one reminds me of maybe something that would be in Nepal or in the Orient or something. Then I'll get it. Lanterns especially sometimes show up there. I can hang this outside. I can put a candle in it, and I really like the way it looks. Now, circling and finishing up the table, I also always look for things that are wood. So I guess I'm kind of animal, vegetable, mineral. When I go to the Goodwill store, I look for things that are wood. I look for things that are textured, like baskets, and I also look for things that are ceramic or metal. This I got, and I have used this I don't know how many times. This is just an interesting box. What does it say on the outside? From Detroit, Michigan, from Goddard and Goddard. I don't know what it was for, but I like it because it inspires creativity. So over the years, I have put little cell packs of flowers in there, which makes a cute little display case for them. I have put flatware in here, forks, knives, spoons, etc. I've put that in there. I have put cellophane down at the bottom, and then I've used it for breadsticks and different kinds of things that I might want to serve with an Italian meal. I just like the way it looks. It could be a receptacle for almost anything, and it has I guess kind of that farmhouse chic or distressed industrial chic that I really like. So maybe that will give you some ideas next time you go to your Goodwill store. I can hear some of you saying, well, she must have a really good Goodwill store. I would just say, it's okay. It's not great. It's certainly not as good as the thrift stores in Salida, Colorado, but periodically it's on my way to Lowe's. So periodically I just stop in there to see what I can find and what I can reuse and repurpose. I love the fact that it is giving new life to new things and inspiring creativity. So next time you are ready for an outing, make sure to wear your mask, but get out there and go to your Goodwill store and see if you can find some treasures that you can use in your own home and garden. So tired because today was one of those kinds of days like when you were a kid and you played outside all day, and at the end of the day you were absolutely exhausted, and that's how I feel because I got to play outside all day and now I am rather exhausted. But I want to show you lots of things that I would include in the category of thrifted finds, but also just being a thrifty gardener. So let's kind of do a walkabout. This might be a little bit longer than normal because I want to convey a couple of things to you that I've been meaning to tell you for a while. So number one, I want to give a shout out to some people. I don't have time to read all of your messages, but I read most of them, and if you are a YouTube member, I definitely read yours. I want to give a shout out to Karen Louise. She sent the sweetest message. In her pain, she recently lost her husband. She did the kindness of sending me such a lovely note, and I can't tell you how much that meant to me. That was so kind. I also want to give a shout out to Sue, who told me that she was going to do lots of geraniums too this year, and they were going to be white, and I just want to see what it looks like, Sue, so send us some pics, okay? And we'll put them in the community tab. And then thirdly, this was Stuart's idea. Somebody else commented that they kind of miss my garden the way it was in the past, even though they were enjoying it now. And when I say in the past, I mean prior to the really very harsh winter we had. So Stuart had the great idea that in the community tab, if you're a YouTube, Linda Vodder YouTube member, that in the community tab, we will put approximately, Stuart, not every day, but as often as we can, approximately a year ago, what it looked like at this same point in time. So if you're new to my channel or whatever, you can kind of look back and see. You may notice some things, you may notice nothing at all. Nevertheless, there will be some things that those who followed me for a long time can revisit and see how substantively some of, particularly the evergreens have changed, the trees have changed, and also maybe how the light has changed because of that. So, okay, now let's get to it. So number one, let's talk about some of these things. So much of my garden is thrifted that I sometimes forget to tell you that it's thrifted. So I have enough material for a number of these videos about things that are thrifted in my garden. Thrifted, and today thrifty also. So I've talked about the category of metal in general and metal stands in particular. And that isn't just restricted to small metal stands, which I've shown before. This is a large metal stand. I don't know what it was used for. I don't know. There probably was something that sat in here, but it is a wonderful plant stand. And I like it because it's lightweight and portable, and I can move it wherever I want. So today, as I'm kind of tricking out my garden with container plantings, I put this basket. This is one that's going to be in my QVC line, and these baskets, you guys, they're weatherproof. I think I need to go back and check. I think there are 5 sizes within each set, which is something I love about them. And I like them because they're really malleable. So for example, this one, thanks Stuart, this one you can tell is moldable enough and flexible enough that I could get it to conform to the inside of this section. So I found these gorgeous pink begonias. As I have said, I'm into begonias and also geraniums this year. And then I just put a couple, I haven't potted them up yet, but they will get into their terracotta pots. I've got just a couple of 1-gallon baby gem boxwood from Southern Living, and I've got another repeat, just the twin of up here, the identical twin of another begonia, and here's then the little baby basket. And I think these will be really sweet, you guys, when all of this larkspur blooms in purple and these little baskets are nestled in there. It will be a fun kind of temporary display for late spring, early summer. Okay, now let's progress through the garden. The light's going to be a little bit uneven, but it's evening and it's absolutely beautiful out. So this is one of those kind of things you wouldn't think of using in the garden, but I've got, and this is not a thrift store find, but this is a wonderful thing. This is a collapsible garden wagon. Some of you ask, why don't you just use a garden wagon? Well, sometimes I do. And when I'm really doing a heavy day of gardening, I use this one. I'll put a link below. This is their collapsible garden wagon. Now, the reason I don't use it all the time is because my husband sometimes uses it when he goes fishing or when he goes camping, to kind of transport all of his things, his accoutrement that he needs for fishing and camping. But this is the thrift store find. This is just one of these, inexpensive kind of Mexican blankets that you can get. I have seen them in Santa Fe. I've seen them in different places. This one I actually just got at the thrift store, and I like it because what it does is I just kind of use it as a liner for this little wagon, and that way it doesn't get all dirty and everything. My husband and I can just lift out this rug, take it out, and then it's ready for him to use it. And this is where I keep all of my stuff in here. So that's another thrift store find, something I might be a little bit hesitant to use indoors as a blanket, but outdoors it's absolutely perfect. And I think it's very cheery and I like it. So that's another kind of odd thing. An unusual kind of thrift store find that you might want to think about. Now, I try to always be honest with you guys, but today I told you a lie because I told you I would show you what the corner that we did yesterday looked like after it was all tricked out. But I just didn't have time to finish up the hanging baskets, and so I'm going to wait on that and show it to you once it's all finished. So I promised to do that for you. So let's take just an intermission here, a little commercial. Look at this Deutzia. Stuart, would you show people? That is just gorgeous, blooming in white. And that's spelled D-E-U-T-Z-I-A, you guys. I got this years and years ago. It's not a plant that you really find very frequently, so you may have to look for it on the internet. I got this so many years ago and I don't really remember, but these sweet little bells are just too dear. And it blooms at the same time as the viburnum in white, and I love that. Okay, so now, Stuart, if you'll just very carefully back up. This to me is like the most fun form of play. It's kind of like when you were a kid and you were putting things together with Lincoln Logs or Legos or something like that. Well, to me, this is play, and these are some thrift store finds that kind of came together as a little vignette. And sometimes I like to give as a gift a vignette in its totality. So I'll put something together that I just think looks like that person, and I will give it to them as a gift. So last weekend, I talked about going to a succulent store and a little indoor houseplant store with my daughter-in-law to be and my son, and we bought some pots. But these are all from the thrift store. So these are just little cachepos. Now, I could very easily drill a hole into the bottom of these and actually plant them, but since these are going to be gifted to someone, I don't want to do that yet. I'll let them determine if they want them to have drainage or not. And here's another one I found at the same time at the same location. So I'm always looking for things that are in a family together. And then all I did was put in plants that also looked like they were a family together. This was in the ground cover section. I can't even remember what this is called. This is common ajuga. This is a purple romaine. That's just beautiful. And this is a creeping thyme. Now, I found these three, and they're all glazed pottery, and they have a very organic color palette that I think looks good together. So I thought of them as kind of a little family of planters and of vases. And this is another reason. I've showed you this piece before. It's one of those just invaluable plant stands that can be used for so many reasons. In this case, I've just got this inside of it. This also does not have drainage, so the recipient can use it as a vase or as a planter as they see fit. Now, since I don't let anything go to waste, here's a little gift from the squirrels. So they think that they really have my number, and they tear apart the coir liners to hanging baskets and things, which is just one more reason that we are mono a mono. But I love it after they kind of shred it, and I find these shredded masses around, And I love to use it as an organic kind of mulch topping for my containers. I like it ever so much better than Spanish moss. And so they think they have thwarted me, but oh no, I have figured out a way to use some of that kind of torn apart coir. So I really like the way that looks. So what I would do is just package all of these things up together and give it to them as a gift. Now this little one, by the way, I don't even remember where I got it. I just had it. I remembered that I had it, and it went with this aesthetic and this color thematic. They all looked good together. So I am someone who re-gifts, and I thought all of these would look great together, and so I will just package them up and give them probably either to my daughter-in-law or to Stuart, because he has been wanting to get into houseplants, haven't you, Stuart? Okay, so anyhow, I think this is just a really fun vignette, and then I have a little candle here. So I can enjoy this temporarily. If I was keeping these for myself, then I would just take out the ajuga, take out the ground cover, and after I finished enjoying them, I would plant them in the ground. So these little family units are things that I always look for at the thrift store. Now, if you'll come around the corner with me, this is something that it occurred to me you guys have probably seen before in previous years, but I never pointed it out as a thrift store find. So this is just an old, maybe it's a carpenter's bench. I'm not really sure what it was when I got it, and I've had this for years, you guys. When I got it, it was painted a baby blue, and I enjoyed it that way for a while, and then I wanted something that was a little bit more seamless in my garden. So now it has more of a dark, kind of a, I don't know, coppery patina or a dark gray patina. And right now, at this point in time, because it is, what I like about it is it's very mobile. Benches like this that you will find, whether they're metal or they're wood, are, I think, invaluable in the garden, because they make lightweight tables that you can use for display, or you can use as side tables for when you're sitting outside. So right now this one is holding my little rosemary collection and some of my small olive trees. This will grow. It may stay here, it may move, I don't know. Now I want to point out that this rose here, which is a climbing old blush, this breaks my heart a little bit because right now it is usually in full bloom. Pink blossoms that completely cascade over this picket fence in the corner, and all of that new growth came out and it completely froze out this year, and it's starting all over, but I see signs of hope, because look, there's a tiny little bud there, and there's a tiny little bud here. So I'm giving it a feed, and hopefully it will still perform. I've got some pruning on it that I need to do, and I will do that. Another thing that I wanted to mention was last year I would mostly do garden tours and garden walkabouts after things were pretty much already in place and they looked the way I wanted them to look. In other words, all of the containers were already planted, things were already styled the way I wanted them to be styled. But this year, because so many of you want to know behind the scenes and the how-to and kind of how my mind works in putting together a composition, I'm showing you the uglies. I'm showing you a lot more befores rather than just the afters. So you too can maybe use some of these tips, and hopefully in the comments share your tips that I can learn from of how we put together these beautiful little displays in our various gardens. So now let's come this way, Stuart. And this is one of my most loved, I won't even call it a thrifted item. Let's just say it was in somebody's trash pile at the end of their driveway, and I took it. And this is the remnants. I got this like 6 years ago. And at that time, it was whole and beautiful, and I loved it. It had that French laundry basket look, and I used it for years outside, and now there's only half of it remaining, but I still love it. And what I'll probably use it for is just to corral something. Maybe in the potager it might corral some greens or something. But even after they have started to decay, I still find baskets really, really useful. Though I have to say I do love the baskets in my new QVC line that will not decay and that are weatherproof. Okay, so Stuart, if you will come this way, show the pretty stuff as we walk. I want to point out something I have pointed out before. But we have a lot of new viewers, and I continue to kind of get comments on it and questions about it, and that is this bird bath. Now, don't judge me on my housekeeping because I have not cleaned out the bird bath yet. We had horrific winds once again yesterday, so I've got a lot of work to do. But a lot of you have asked me about this bird bath. The bird bath itself is beautiful. And this was actually done by a local artist here. This was a gift to a friend of mine. And I really love it. And I wanted to elevate it and not have it, thank you, Stuart, and not have it on the ground. So I had an old metal table that used to have a glass top. And I thought, well, why can't I just turn it upside down and use the base, the legs of it, to support, just like your diamond ring or on your engagement ring, to support that saucer. And then the round part is below. So you can see that the top is hidden below beneath this ground cover. And so what I do, and I bet what you do, because so many of you like to reuse, recycle, repurpose, and be thrifty gardeners, is you just look around and you see, okay, what do I already have in my basement, in my garage, in my attic that I could use that would serve a utilitarian purpose, but would also very much have kind of a vintage look and already be aged and be very functional. You don't have to buy something new. I'm lazy. I don't like to shop if I don't have to. And if I can repurpose something I already have, I like that kind of aha moment. Now, years ago when I was in high school and in college, I worked at a kind of a high-end gift store, and I would do their displays, and I was always looking for how I could find something that was a display item that would kind of convey the look and feel and theme that I was trying to communicate. And so this does just that. Okay, so Stuart, let's come this way. Here is another, this is a dollar store item for the thrifty gardener, not necessarily a thrifted item. This is just one of those, okay, this one is Hoppy. It's just one of these brushes and squeegees that you get at the dollar store. I use it to clean off my glass top table, all of my windows and everything. It's very inexpensive, but I find it indispensable in the garden. And like I say, for just a couple of bucks, you can make your job a whole lot easier. It's definitely one of those, the right tool for the right job kind of things. So if you're at your local dollar store, you might want to pick one of those up. And then lastly, if you'll come over here. Now, I did not get these at the thrift store, but I see them at the thrift store all of the time. These actually were a hand-me-down from a friend of mine down the street. And I said, oh, I can use those out in the garden. And that is just a set of these TV trays. She had a set of them. She wasn't going to use them. I used them inside for a while for different kinds of things. And then I thought, well, I'm just going to put these out in the garden and use them as kind of a makeshift surface that I could use for potting and things. And they have held up remarkably well. And you can find these at the thrift store for practically nothing. But they age kind of beautifully. I really like the way that they look. They're inexpensive, and even when they're painted and the paint starts to wear away, I don't mind that at all. So if you're looking for an inexpensive potting table, potting bench, or even something to use as a display for your topiaries or your prized geraniums or whatever, then you might take a look at these. So there's just a few ideas that you guys might want to look for next time you're in your thrift store or your garage sale or wherever. Make sure that if you've got some really good scores that you found recently, that you comment below. If you like this, make sure to give us a thumbs up. And as always, I will see you guys again in the garden next week. Hey guys, it is Thrifting Sunday, so I thought today we would thrift and style. And what a gorgeous day it is. Did you hear the church bells in the background? It's just really lovely out today. So I thought I would just kind of put together 10 of my thrift store finds and let you know kind of how I'm planning on styling them for Easter. But I would like you guys to comment below with how you would style them for your Easter table, or different ideas of different ways that I could zhuzh these up to make them look really cool in our holiday decor, but just in our indoor and outdoor decor as well. And some of these you're not going to believe that they came from a thrift store. Now, number one, I'm going to start here. So I like to get things that I know will be receptacles for immediate plop and plant, or plop a plant, I should say. And this is just a hanging basket of bacopa in here. So what I'm doing is taking off, I'm sure you guys have done this 1,000 times too, I'm just taking off the hanger and then just plopping it inside. And even though a tiny bit of the plant, the plastic pot of this bacopa plant shows, nevertheless, as this continues to grow, it will cascade over the side and you won't notice. Now this is just a rusty old planter. It has no drainage holes, and typically sometimes I will put drainage holes in the bottom, and sometimes I won't. But there you see those little felt glides that I like to put on the bottom of anything, because look, on this stainless steel table, they just glide without scratching whatsoever. So that in and of itself would just look so wonderful as a centerpiece for your Easter table, for any kind of occasion that you're celebrating, with a couple of candlesticks along with it. Maybe some beautiful Easter eggs, some yellow Easter eggs would look pretty with that. So this is just, I think this is a Goodwill find. Again, sometimes you guys tell me that your Goodwills are expensive thrift stores. But when I say thrift, I'm not confining it just to like Goodwill or Salvation Army. To me, thrifting includes almost everything, like tag sales, garage sales, things that people leave on the side of the road, thrifting your own basement, thrifting someone else's basement. Things that people at one time or another decided that they didn't want them anymore, and they were putting them in a venue to be reused, recycled, repurposed, and reloved by someone else. So this in particular is wonderful. At other times I have had fabulous large succulents in it, and it looked equally as beautiful, I think. Now this is a sweet, this has been featured on one of my Instagram things before, where I did an Instagram challenge of what to put in this sweet little chalice shaped vessel. It's porcelain. And again, this is another plop a plant. This is just a simple little fern. that goes in here. This often resides in my bathroom next to my sink because ferns like humidity. It would also be wonderful, you guys, to hold your toothpaste and your toothbrushes. Anything like that would be really fun. And so colored pencils, it's just a good, nice size. So that also came from my Goodwill store. This next item came from just a junk store in a small town in Oklahoma. So that would be my suggestion if you feel like you don't have really good thrifting sources right near you. It's a fun thing to do when you're out of town, especially small towns. They often have locations like this. It's fun to peruse and see what kind of treasures you can find. Now this one, this little stone, it could be stone container, bowl, vase, whatever it is, planter, could be used for so many things. Now, why this captured my eye, and this is a tip, if you are trying to kind of categorize things to look for in the thrift store, this captured my eye because its blue stoneware facade looks very much, actually it's identical to some pottery lamps that I have in my bedroom. This matches it perfectly. So when I saw it, I got this so that I can have a sweet little flower arrangement, bedside plant. I could put, you know, little candies in here, anything like that. But that is another general category that will catch my eye when I'm at a location, is something that is the same finish or material and matches something that I already have. That makes it look less junky and more kind of consistent and harmonious with other things that I've already got inside and outside. Now, for a long time, I was trying to think, what can I do? Because you guys may be like me and you buy lots of forced hyacinths, paper whites, smaller daffodils like this, and they come in these hyacinth jars. At Trader Joe's, I think right now you can get a forced bulb for like $2.99 or $3.99. So what happens? I end up with a whole bunch of these bottles. And I kept thinking, well, I could take these to my junk store, my Goodwill store, and they could be reused for the same purpose. But they just are so appealing all together in a basket like this, which, by the way, did come from a thrift store with its divided partitions. Excuse me, my mouth isn't working well today. Partitions. And obviously, lots of different things could be put in this basket. I could roll up napkins, flatware, all sorts of things. But how fun is this to put all of these jars in this basket to carry outside when I'm dining al fresco and we may be drinking some rosé or something. And you know when you're in a restaurant and they will bring you a refill of wine when your glass is empty and they bring them in those sweet little carafes? Why couldn't you use these as those wine carafes for when somebody needs a refill? I think it would be charming for that. It would also be fun to fill these up with jelly beans or Easter eggs or chocolates or anything like that and put them at each table, especially if you did something fun like buy custom-sized corks that you then put on the top as an enclosure. Now what I did was I just measured the inside of the surface, and then on Amazon I just bought some corks. Now this one actually, it will fit gently. If I wanted a tighter fit, I would get one that had a smaller diameter. And then you could use it for things like, herbal vinegars, or I don't know, what else, Susu? Susu's here again, Stuart's mother. Salad dressing, vinaigrettes, things like that. I think that would be really, really fun and so dear. And then you could tie a ribbon around it with that person's name and it would be a wonderful little take-home treasure. So that is my idea where I thrifted my basement and paired it with something that I bought at the thrift store. Now, this one was a real score, you guys, and it was something that I purchased. This was at a store in Colorado, in Salida, And I just fell in love with this basket. Look at this. Isn't that marvelous? Long and thin. And I just think it's absolutely wonderful. Now, I have not used it for this purpose yet, but I promise you in my future, when we can all gather together again in safety. Stuart is shaking his head. Oh yes. I'm going to have a baguette party where I'm going to have this filled with different kinds of baguettes, and then I'm going to have on the table just all sorts of trimmings and trappings and goodies to fill your baguette sandwich with. Make your own. It looks so Italian to me, so rustic and perfect for outdoor dining. But I would love your ideas on what else you could put in here that would look really, really cool to make it a multitasker for different kinds of occasions. So let me know about that. But I think you'll agree, even though this was a little bit more of an expensive find, I think this was maybe $12, which at my stores is a little bit pricey, but I absolutely love it. So that is my next, or my another good thrift store find. Now, I've talked about planting living Easter baskets and living Easter boxes. Well, why not plant a living Easter bowl? So this is a bowl that I got at the thrift store, and I sometimes will set it on top of one of those columnar pillar candle holders or something to give it height. Sometimes I'll put it on a cake stand filled with all sorts of things. One year I did it filled with nothing but absolutely beautiful spring vegetables, cabbages, celery, turnips, carrots, and it made a fabulous centerpiece. Bunches of lettuce and parsley. And this was very inexpensive. I think this was a couple dollars. It's got a little chip on the side of it, but I don't care. This year it would just be so sweet to plant with Easter grass. And this is what we did not too long ago, you guys. This is 2 weeks old, this grass is. And look at how thick and full it is. And then even more dear when you find something in white porcelain to pair it with. And yes, I found these darling little Easter bunnies. I got a set of, I can't remember, 6 to 8 of them. They were, Stuart's nodding his head, yes. And how dear are those? And they hold a place card. So you could use this at your table setting. You could use that as a gift tag. You could use it to denote whose Easter basket is whose. If you've got a lot of littles and you're trying to decide, they need to know which one is their basket. That was a real score, and I'm going to do next week a whole thrifted Easter centerscape for you, centerpiece on a tablescape. That's the word I was looking for, on a tablescape that I think will be absolutely fun, all or 90% with thrifted finds. That will be great. So here's another really great find, you guys. This is an old rusted mesh strainer. It might even be antique, I don't know. Stuart, can you capture that at the bottom? So whatever I plant in here will need pretty good drainage. I could put something in here to kind of make that drainage a little less excessive. But this would be a perfect container if you guys like to grow succulents. So putting succulents and planting succulents in there is immediately what I thought of. But I think I'm going to do mine with just an assortment of Dusty Millers and marigolds. And isn't that just so sweet? And it would be cute then to have, just a side bowl of cherry tomatoes or something like that along with it. But I think it's really, really dear. And then I've got it atop one of the things I always look for, and that's these just old metal stands, because what they do is elevate them. And especially when I'm entertaining, and like, for example, at my baguette party, it's fun to have different ingredients on different levels in the center of the table. It has that layering look that I like so much. So that is a very, very good find. Now I'm going to move this down so I can talk about a couple of other things. This t-shirt was a thrifted find. Now, I've told you a million times that a lot of my clothing isn't too precious or whatever, because I'm working outside, it gets dirty. And so I'm always looking for usually really bright t-shirts and things like that I can wear on camera that will stand out a little bit, because a lot of my regular wardrobe tends to just be in neutral colors, and sometimes it's fun to have just a pop of something that's a little brighter. So I'm always looking for fun t-shirts that I can wear out into the garden that aren't in too bad of shape. And I really liked this one, and I loved the color of it. Now this, it's expensive thrifting, but nevertheless, estate sales can also be a source of really good buys. Now I'm going to interrupt myself to do a little commercial here. Someone contacted me from Dallas, a follower, and asked if they could come by my house when they were in Oklahoma City. And by the way, Kristen, I'm so sorry I missed you. I was out plant shopping, flower shopping, and I missed you when you came by. But she came by, she brought me the dearest gift, and I can't tell you how touched I was. But what nearly made me tear up were these, because she came by with her kids. And I want to make sure that they both get equal credit. Because look, the kids made me. Grace and Maggie made me these little cards, and I'm just so touched. These will hold a place of prominence on my bulletin board or my refrigerator, I promise you. Look, a little thank you note. Thank you for letting us see your garden. Talk about a treasure. These are will be very great treasures of mine, and I will put them front and center for all to see. Grace and Maggie, thank you so much. So they were sitting, this one in particular, because it had that bright gold color, was sitting inside a pot of this brilliant gold wallflower, which is a plop that plant into a beautiful cast stone planter. Now my friend Roger, that some of you know and have met here on this YouTube channel before, he got this at an estate sale for me for all of $10. Now if you bought this at a nursery, it would be many, many times that. But I don't have time to go to a lot of estate sales, but Roger is my proxy, and when he finds something wonderful, he'll sometimes go ahead and pick it up for me. And this was one of those absolutely beautiful finds. So there's just a few little Easter ideas from the thrift store. Again, if you liked this one, make sure to like, subscribe, but also please tell me what you would do with these same items and how I can use them functionally in different ways as the seasons progress, or how you might use them on your tablescape this Easter. Thank you guys for hanging out. Go out and enjoy the beautiful weather right now. Obviously, I am not the only one that likes to thrift for the garden and inside your home, because I got something in the mail and this touched me so much, you guys. Mary in Florence, Arizona, she sent me a belated birthday present with the sweetest card, and she said that she found these at a Goodwill store, hanging all together in a bag at a Goodwill store. And she knows how much I love taper candles and candle snuffers, or snifters, my mom used to call them. And look, she found 3 of them in a sack at her Goodwill store. Aren't they dear? So you never know what kind of treasures you're going to find, and these could be used inside or out, but I just think it's just as sweet as can be. I just love it, and I also love the scent of when the candle goes out, and the scent of the of the wax drying. So that is my #1 thrifted item for the garden or for the house, compliments of my friend Mary. Now let's go elsewhere in the garden and I'll show you something else. Now let me talk a little bit more about my thrifting philosophy again before I show you the next item that I actually got 2 of them a number of years ago. So some people comment and said, how much junk do you really need? Well, I don't think of it as junk. I think of them as things that are repurposed or regifted. But that said, for probably every one thing I bring home, I take 10 things. So it's not like it's accumulating over time. I'm not really a hoarder. I gift a lot of it, but that way I can kind of economically use something for a little while, and then I can give it back to Goodwill, or like I say, re-gift it. So that's kind of my philosophy. I don't feel guilty about doing it. I'm not going to Target or someplace like that, buying a bunch of new stuff that then I don't use. This way I can use them, I can find delight in them, and then I can pass them on, either back to Goodwill, a thrift store, or to another friend. Okay, so here's my next thing. I like to look, as I've told you, for any kind of metallic items, including things like this old rusted hose holder. Now it kind of looks like a shepherd's hook, and I could easily hang a lantern on it, or I could hang a hanging basket on it. In this case, you'll see that I had a lantern hanging on it, but it's also used as a support for this euonymus topiary that took a hit this winter, but it's coming back out. So I'm kind of getting a twofer. It's a twofer use with this. I got a couple of them at the junk store or Goodwill a number of years ago. One is in my front yard. This one is in my backyard. So look for any kind of hooks, stands, or any kind of holders that you might be able to repurpose in your garden, and you don't pay anything for them being pre-aged. Well, one of the things I love about topiary is the art form of the display itself. Not too long ago, I saw an article in Martha Stewart Living. It was a library, and she had some of her topiaries, and they were sitting on what looked to be copper saucers. Now, I imagine that copper saucers could be pretty expensive, but if you are thrift-minded and thrifty, you can find something that's kind of a replica of that look, and I did. I got these on Amazon, and what they are is just copper burner covers for your stove, and they really look like copper. They look kind of high-end. They come in a set, 2 different sizes, and then I just put some felt glides on the bottom, and they look really nice inside. They protect your surfaces, and they look kind of high-end for not much money at all. Now, also a thrifty find you can get at the dollar store, and I buy these almost by the dozens. I love these inexpensive, you can see it rained last night, inexpensive glass coasters. Now I think what they really are candle holders to hold columnar or pillar candles, but they make brilliant saucers for your topiary, for your house plants, whatever. They've got these little feet on them, and they just kind of disappear as saucers. Plus, what I like about them, if you use them on a terrace stand like mine, those little feet kind of nestle into the grooves and the horizontal bars of the plant terrace itself, so it secures them in place, but it gives them all kind of a nice finish look, whether you're using them inside or out. So there's a couple of thrifty finds for you to use in your garden or in your house. Now let's move on to the next one. Well, Stuart was making fun of me because in the last thrifty find segment, I couldn't remember what those burner covers were called. So he was making fun of me and just asked me, so do I know what this is called? And yes, I do. This would be called a basket, a rectangular basket with a lid on it. I really like this find. I got it not too long ago at the Goodwill store. And what I like about it is it's the perfect size. It's the perfect width for seeds. So something like this, at the end of the season, I like to collect my own larkspur, poppy seeds, other types of seeds. This way, I can collect my own seed and I can then put them in a sweet basket like this from the thrift store, and I can gift it to somebody else at Christmas time. Well, it's a really damp, cool day, and it's especially damp and cool back here in my little work corner. Well, one of my husband's favorite things to do is take country roads, take the back roads to all of the different small towns in Oklahoma. It really is kind of fun. You guys might like doing it too. And what is fun about it a lot of times are those stores that you see typically on the outskirts of town when you're first driving in. Sometimes they'll be right next to a farm stand, but there'll be like a flea market store, an antique store, and you can find all sorts of cool things. A lot of them will be sitting outside. And years ago, I saw these old laundry tubs, and they were doing just that. They were sitting outside and they were calling my name. And why I wanted them was because I knew they would be brilliant for me to put potting soil in, and also my beloved gravel. Now, I've seen these a number of times at stores like this. I don't know how unique they were, but I've seen a lot of them, so you might be able to still find some yourself. Now, one thing to remember, if you use them for this same purpose, mine came on a stand like this, and they're really nice. They just kind of look like big square buckets. But one thing I learned over time is that they do have a drainage hole at the bottom, so make sure that you keep that drainage hole open. Otherwise, when it rains like it did yesterday, the water won't go all the way through and permeate the containers. They'll just kind of be a mosquito draw. So this would be another fun thing for you guys to look for a thrifted find at a flea market. Well, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Whenever I go to junk stores or thrift stores, I'm always looking for any kind of stands that may have had a previous life with another purpose, but that I can somehow reimagine or reuse in my garden. And this is a perfect example. This is just a beautiful old stand. I'm not sure what it held originally, maybe a gazing ball or something that form-fitted into these just circular holders or pins around the edge. But I have used it for several different things, and right now this iteration of its use is just a basket. It's actually a hanging basket that I've just nestled into here in between those kind of metal prongs. Now, in the past, what I also have used it for is a small table, kind of to showcase a fern. I was actually used it inside, and I got a great big, just a stone tile from Home Depot, and I put the stone tile on top of this, and then I just had a big cascading fern that was just kind of pendulous and overflowing around the edges. Because in and of itself, I think it's just inherently beautiful however you use it, and I can use it indoors or outdoors, and I think it's very multi-purpose. So another reason to look for any kind of stands that can be refashioned into a number of different ways. Now let's go to one more and we'll finish up this thrifting weekend. Now, my husband made me promise that I would include this in my thrift store Sunday segment because he's so proud of himself. He found this on the side of the road. I guess it was put out for Big Junk Day. And I'm not really sure what it is, but it's got a sort of kitsch charm. It looks like maybe it's a samurai costume vase or a bust or something like that. At any rate, he thought it was kind of fun and kind of charming, and I guess it is. Let me show you what it looks like on top. And I guess you have to be a little bit older maybe to finally appreciate the charm that is kitsch and how you might want to use it in some way in your home or in the garden. But my husband thought this was just too fun to pass up, and he was like a little kid when he brought it home to me. So there is your last thrift store or junk store or free by the side of the road find for this weekend. Well, last week I did a thrifting video and we went in and around the garden and I talked about 10 things that I had thrifted in the garden and how I use them. Well, today it's really muggy and rainy outside, so I thought I would show you how I have thrifted some things inside my home and how I've styled them. Now, before I do that, let me talk just a little bit about my thrifting philosophy, I guess, because you guys have brought up so many great points. I love it. I love the way you share with me some things that you have thrifted and how you've turned trash into treasure. I love that. Comment below, subscribe if you like these kinds of things, but I just love the interaction. A number of you have expressed some concern about at what point does thrifting become hoarding? And I can so relate to that because the older I get, I still maintain, I guess, my love of thrifting, but I'm also purging as much as I thrift. So a lot of the things that come into my house go out again very quickly, or they are gifted to others, or if I bring one thing in, another thing goes out. So I really am anti having too much stuff, but I do like layering. So that brings me to my very first thing. Number one, now is a great time to go to your thrift store, whether it's Goodwill, a garage sale, a secondhand store, and look for Easter baskets. Now, I gave you kind of a tease because I showed you this last week. This is a thrifted basket that I got at Goodwill. It was under $2 or $3, I think, maybe even less. And then, if you guys have followed along for any length of time, you know that I planted real Easter grass. And it just so happened that this basket would hold a kind of a compressed peat moss pot perfectly. So I am growing my Easter grass. I will put a link to the video where we did this below. It came up in 3 days. It's been germinating. By April 4th, this is just going to be really, really long and lush and profuse, and I will be ready to style it then with chocolate bunnies and all sorts of things. I'm going to do that a little bit later because tease, I'm going to do an Easter table with all thrifted items, or 90% thrifted items, and I can't wait to show you that, and this will be part of that tableau. Okay, so this would be number one, planting a Goodwill basket with Easter grass. Number two, I have a certain, as you all do, this isn't just exclusive to me, believe me, I know. We all have a certain kind of aesthetic, and we kind of we develop a preference, or we just like something. And so when we go out and we thrift, it makes thrifting easier because those are the things we're kind of narrowing down. And I love anything that's kind of this galvanized pewter, galvanized metal. Many of you have seen these on my mantle before. Now, these are not thrifted, but all of these three components are, and this is my newest piece. This is a heavy metal candlestick. It has some detailing on it and some fluting and ridging that actually matches some candlesticks that I already have. Now, in the summer and in the springtime, I don't have nearly as much stuff on my mantle as I do right now, but it's still cold periodically, and I'm still in the morning sometimes lighting a fire. So I still have this little montage of galvanized metal things here. These I got years ago, and they hold my matches and my fireplace matches. But even though I bought them at separate times, they all kind of have a cohesive look. Now, some of you guys say, oh, your thrift store must be really great and mine's terrible. I often go in there because I'm always dropping things off. I often go in there, it's a couple of blocks, or not a couple, but just a few blocks from my house, so I can go in there frequently. And that's the trick. You just go in there frequently. I don't spend a lot of time. It's usually a quick in and out. I pick up things and put them back equally as often, but it's just a kind of a fun thing for me to do. It's also on the way to one of my nurseries, so it's an easy run in, run out, drop my stuff off and go. Now I want to do, this is not a thrifting thing, but I wanted to give you a little update on these hollowed out tree trunks. I think before, Stuart, do you remember what I had in these before? Did I have amaryllis? I can't remember exactly what I had in them before. It was something very Christmassy, but right now I have made them a little bit more springy. I've put in fern, I have put in some ivy, and I know you guys will have my back on this. If any of you watched it and you remember what I had in them before, my brain isn't what it used to be. Please let me know. So that's great. I want to give my friend Bree I think she's in Virginia, but she was the one who told me about the wooden box that had Made in Texas on it, that the pecan pie came in. She gave me another heads up today so I could do a shout out for her. Thank you. I believe your name was Bree. I did think it was interesting that you were in Virginia, not in Texas. Okay, so that is number 1 and number 2 on my thrifting inside. Now let's move and I'll show you 3 and 4. Somebody put in the comments below, so why do I thrift when I very obviously don't have to? Well, number 1, never make an assumption that somebody really doesn't have to thrift. But I'm one of 10 kids, and so thriftiness just kind of comes naturally to me, and I love reusing, recycling, and repurposing things. And I also like mixing high and low, and as I've said a million times, I love the patina and the age on things. So that leads me to these 2 different finds. This I just got this week. This is just a large ceramic, kind of a cherry red pitcher with a really large mouth that I've put some Ostromeria, some roses, and a few hellebores from Trader Joe's. I think it looks really happy, very festive, and as soon as I saw it, I thought to myself, oh my gosh, in August that would just look really fabulous with a bouquet of sunflowers in it. So it's just cheery and it made me happy. Now the stand that it's in, this is my 3.5, I guess. This is something I already had, but it's the type of thing I look for at thrift stores all the time. Anything that is a stand. This had a glass casserole dish that nestled inside of it. The casserole dish broke and I didn't want to throw away the stand because I love its wood patina, and I like the fact that it lends importance to really anything I put in it. I often will nestle a basket in here or a bowl. In this case, it's a pitcher, and I can surround it with some little clementines. Now, Hubs and I are fairly recent empty nesters, I guess. Not as recent as I would like to think, but I don't really need large, when I'm cooking now, I don't really need large casserole dishes, pots and pans, that kind of thing. So I find when I go now, I am looking for things that are a little bit more made for 2. And this splatterware green casserole was just the ticket. I got it at Goodwill. I think it's really cute and clever. It too would have been fun potted up with some kind of Easter grass or microgreens or something. It's really fun to use at Christmas time. I love the way it looks. I love its kind of old vibe. And more importantly, I like the fact that it is perfect for 2. So I can bake lasagna in it. I can bake almost any kind of casserole in it, and it's the perfect size for 2. Again, both of these things were under $3, but I think the overall effect when you kind of zhuzh them up is far more expensive looking. Stuart is laughing at me. Stuart, have you not heard the word zhuzh before? It is a very common horticultural term amongst us gardeners. So anyhow, I hope you like these. Number 3, 3.5, and 4. Well, practically everything that I thrift in one way or another is related to topiary. And that's the case with my number 5 selection of things that I always look for at the thrift store. And that is just old metal trays. I like to use them to congregate my topiaries, my smaller topiary, into one place. I sometimes use the larger ones, sometimes the smaller ones. I really don't care if they're polished or not. In fact, it makes my life a whole lot easier if I don't polish them and it looks like it's intentional patina. Now, what I do like to do once I get any one of these type of trays is put these felt glides on the bottom of them. That way, when I use them on a piece of wood furniture or my mahogany built-ins, I'm not in any way scarring or blemishing the wood surface. So I really like them for that purpose. I have a whole bunch of them. I just keep them stacked over here. I use them inside and out. They are, like I say, they're not expensive at all. So if they get a little bit rusty or if something happens to them, I don't worry about it too much. And most of the time they're covered with topiary anyway, so you kind of can't see it. Now, I have a thing for trays and I also have a thing for pitchers, and I love pitchers. So when you're looking for that old silver plate stuff, anytime you can find an old pitcher, I think it makes a wonderful find, because let's see, this one was all of $6.96, I guess. Unless it was at 50% off on 50% off day. And you can use these for vases. I could actually use it for ice water or whatever. But again, it would be really beautiful. I love the detailing on it. This is the classic type of thing that women my age got as Christmas gifts, and they're not used practically in so many ways now, but they are very much used for interior decor. Again, I love using these for vases, for ice water, for iced tea, in which case I would give it a little spit polish. So that is number 3, and number 4 of things that I like to look for at the thrift store. And number 5 and number 6 of things that I like to find at the thrift store. Well, I'm here in a very fragrant place from these hyacinths with number 7, 8, 9, and then a number 10 challenge. I've got them all assembled here. Now, number 1 is another one of these silver-plated finds that I just adore. This is actually an ice bucket, and it has a glass liner. Now, it was at the thrift store probably because it didn't have a lid. Normally, this actually lives on the bar where it's used as an ice bucket, but it also happens to fit, is that a 6-inch pot, Stuart? Maybe a 6-inch pot of anything blooming just perfectly. Now, if I have an affection for trays and pitchers, I also have an affection for bowls. And I love this little blue and white bowl. It's a little bit chipped. Let me see if it says anything on the back. Sterling, China, New York City. Anyhow, I just like it. This is the type of thing that would be perfect to use as a gift. You could package it up with some baked goods. You could put some granola in here. You could put some pretty soaps, anything like that to give to someone as a gift. But right now, I am using it as part of my little display here on this side table. These are so cute, I think, you guys. These are miniature little candle holders. Now, what I like about them is obviously, because you guys, I'm kind of slightly obsessed with taper candle holders, and this holds a taper candle, but it's got this, what's the, what's the nursery rhyme where the kid is holding the, Stuart's giving me a look like, oh my gosh, you are so in the weeds. I'm sure somebody will comment below. You guys are so good about always filling in the gaps for me when I have a brain lapse, which happens a lot, but better here than when I do it on live TV. Anyhow, these are so cute. And what I like about them is you can see in this one, if I'm ever so careful, there's a little place for you to store your matchbooks. And I think these are so sweet. Now these are actually, unbelievably, be careful Stuart, these are sterling silver. They're just not polished as such. So they were really a good find. And I have been known to actually take one of these along with me when I travel when I have a little candlelight by my bedside table. I know that sounds a little bit weird, but it's just a special thing that I do for myself sometimes. So these are the kind of little treasures that if you look closely, they're fun to find, to not only use, but I like them because it's just kind of an adventure trying to figure out what their original purpose was. So I think that's kind of a fun find. So that was 7, 8, and 9, and now for my number 10, and this is where I'm going to challenge you guys to put your creativity to work. This is a really heavy wrought iron cachepot. Now I saw this, and then shortly after that, I saw it in a catalog, or maybe it was I think it was a website shop for $150. The other version was just rusted, and this one is not. It's painted black, and you really, I don't know if you can tell, but there's almost like an undercoating of green. It almost looks like a copper patina, but I love this. I have used this for different things before, you guys, but now I want you to tell me what you would put in it. Put it in the comments below, and I'll try to share some of my really favorite ones. And one last housekeeping thing that I wanted to share with you. Look for another video that Stuart and I are going to put up this weekend about becoming a member of our YouTube channel. You guys are so great and so supportive, and I really appreciate that you all understand that this doesn't come without associated costs, and we really appreciate that. So this is the way that you can show your support to us, but we can in return give you some extra perks. I want to give you a forum where you can kind of show off some of your creativity. Look for the particulars on that and all of the other additional features of 2 levels of a YouTube membership to the Linda Vodder channel. Stuart and I just want you to know how much we appreciate all of the good feels that you send our way. We really feel like we've gotten to know some of you pretty well. We appreciate your patience. We appreciate your kindness, and I look forward to doing a lot more with you guys in the future. Hello everyone, and welcome to a special Mother's Day edition of Thrift for Gifts, specifically for Mother's Day, though actually these gifts would work at any time of year, really, for any reason. And I've got a special Mother's Day surprise for you guys at the very end, so you're going to want to watch until then. So my number 1 thrift idea is a 3-tiered stand that I got, I don't know how many years ago, at a thrift store. And you can see it's detached here. It's a little bit rickety. That's probably why it was at the thrift store. Stuart was asking me what it was exactly, and I'm not really sure. I just call it a 3-tiered stand. It may have originally been for pies. It may have originally had no intended use. It was just sold this way. But some of the ways that I have used it in the past are these. Historically, it has been pressed into use for the longest period of time as really basically just a holder outside of my back door to corral all of my garden tools, a basket that I sometimes would put my garden gloves in, anything like that. And it was in kind of a sheltered spot, so if it rained, it wouldn't get too wet, and if it did rain, then the water would wash right through. So that's number 1 reason for it. Number 2, I have had baskets in it on all 3 levels and used it in my kitchen. You could actually use this in this manner with or without baskets for produce. So I would have it when my boys were young and I was doing a lot more cooking in a lot greater volume. I would have potatoes and onions and maybe squash, anything like that, and it was in my kitchen. It then was both decorative and very functional, so that's another way I've used it. I've also used it as a plant stand for plants. So I've had different kinds of ivies that grew on each level and would cascade down. It was really, really fun. I had this outside of my kitchen door, and I liked that purpose because it was not only beautiful and functional, but it gave me some verticality and some height in a much needed space. So if ever you find any kind of three-tiered stand in good shape or in bad shape, it might be something that you pick up at your thrift store. So now let's go on to item number 2. One of my favorite way to gift things is to find some kind of container of really any sort and then put something inside of it that is currently inspiring me or something that may be really, really cherished by the recipient. So in this case, I have an old metal trug of some sorts. I actually shopped my basement for this. The reason that I like it, it's because it fits almost perfectly on top of my stone fireplace outdoors. As a category, that's something that I'm always looking for, something that is exactly the same shape and might be positioned really almost perfectly on something that I've got out in the garden or indoors, and this definitely suits the purpose. Now, I do not have drainage in this. If I wanted to put drainage holes in it, I could plant in it. What I use it for typically is to put kindling in here for my little fireplace. So as I'm gathering up sticks and twigs and any kind of kindling material, then I'll put it in this trug. But right now, if I wanted to gift this to someone, I would fill it with dahlia bulbs. I'm getting ready to do a video for Brex, a bulb source that I rely on heavily, especially for bulbs like dahlias and lilies. And I'm kind of really into dahlias right now, as is everyone. So I've filled this with some dahlia tubers. And then what I like to do is also take the instruction booklet that comes in the box and put it in place along with maybe some of the appropriate plant food or granular food for whatever it is they're planting. Now, obviously, I've got this filled with dahlias as kind of a kit, but you could fill it with geraniums, you could fill it with ivies, you could fill it with really any type of thing that your mother-in-law, or loved one might really appreciate. So that's my number 2 recommendation. Any kind of trug and form-fitting, shape-fitting thing that you might want to use in your garden. Now let's move on to number 3. Well, for my number 3 category and gift idea, I'm going to put this in, let's say a category called catch-all. If I've got something in the garden that has a very specific storage need, in this case, like all of these bamboo sticks, there's support for my topiaries. I've got some plant stakes. I've got some flags that I use when I'm having someone help me in the garden and I need to indicate where something needs to be planted. All of these are long and very vertical. So I consider this just to be an old catch-all thing. It was probably originally a modern vase or something along those lines. Now it's got that rusty old patina that I like. I can keep this in my garden shed area, and it very efficiently and neatly holds all of these vertical things. Now, something that bothers me and that I probably need to change. It tends to collect leafy debris. And part of that is because it also collects water when it rains. Now, I really don't care if any of this gets wet, gets rained on. That doesn't bother me at all. But I really don't like it when this container begins to hold water after a rain, because obviously if it's holding water, it's a wonderful environment for mosquitoes. So probably what I'll do this year is get smart, and I will either put a puncture in the bottom so that it's got good drainage, or let me see, the bottom is metal. So I'll put some kind of hole or multiple holes in the bottom so I get really good drainage. paintage. But this would be a fun thing. It's got a very antique vintage quality. This would be very, very fun, I think. Absolutely cascading with some peonies or with some roses, or probably my favorite, just some kind of cutting from your favorite flowering shrub, which I talked about yesterday. So that would be my number 3. Now let's move on to number 4. Well, number 4 is actually for me. This is a trash into treasure thing. It's not necessarily something that you'd be able to find at the thrift store, but it may be something that you've got lying around in your own garden. And I find it strangely compelling and appealing because I think it's got lots of potential. So I had 2 really large, beautifully patinaed pots, and they basically just shattered from weather-related issues, I guess. And yet, nevertheless, the rim stayed intact in its entire circular beauty. I just love it with all of its mossiness and texture. So periodically, I will just save the rim and use it as some kind of framing mechanism in my garden. So in this case, this is from an old terracotta pot. I love the way it looks with just this little plant staged inside of it. And in this area that's basically a storage area for all of my different terracotta pots, I think it really looks beautiful and is a fun little makeshift focal point in the garden. I've got another example in the back that I'll show you. Well, this is 4.5 for this same idea. You can see right here that the rim of this really gorgeous old pot broke off, and I have salvaged the base and I salvaged the rim of it. It's got wonderful texture and kind of a dental work embossing on the top. A wonderful bas-relief here. So I love the way it looks. It has a very archaeological find kind of vibe to it, and I love that. And if you want to know what its mate is, this is something you have seen before. If you wonder if I actually reuse and rethink the different kinds of pieces of trash that I've got around my house, I absolutely do. Some of you may recognize this broken pot that I have used for many things before. Most recently, I had a huge bouquet of amaryllis at Christmas time, and I used it indoors. I love the way it mimics kind of a Native American archaeological find. My husband is an amateur anthropologist and archaeologist, so we love things that have this look, something that looks like some kind of archaeological remnant. Now, as a gift, it would just be very, very fun if someone likes this type of aesthetic, very rustic, very naturalistic. It might make a good Father's Day present for my husband. I could plant something in it, but this I think would be really, really wonderful. So what would I put in it now? I would just go out and find anything that was in full volume and cascading. A perfect solution for this would just to find a 12 or a 15-inch hanging basket of almost anything, lantana, an ivy, really anything that had a cascading form. Put it in here, plop it in, and give it to someone as a gift. I think that's a wonderful idea. Now let's move on to number 5. Well, let me just say that Mama Squirrels will be getting no Mother's Day present from me, I promise you. Now, this idea, it really reminds me of my mom in many, many ways. It's just an old beat-up garden tool, and it can be really of any form. It could be an old trowel, it could be an old spade, it could be anything. But she used to have some of these, and they weren't necessarily garden tools, they were just old tools, and she had them hanging by our fireplace. She was at that point in time, very into early American design or an early American primitive aesthetic. And so she would have rusty old kitchen utensils or anything of that nature hanging next to our brick fireplace. And you can do that same thing, I think, with these really beautiful old pre-loved, pre-used, worn out tools. And I love the idea of that, because if you've got either in a contemporary setting or really in an old English garden setting like mine, if you had a garden shed with a blank wall or a blank expanse of anything indoors or out, I think it would be really wonderful to hang some of these old tools in kind of an artistic way and assemble them across a broad expanse of space. I think it would be really, really cool. I saw something not exactly like this, but an idea that was similar at P. Allen Smith's Moss Mountain Farm not too long ago in one of his outbuildings. And you could absolutely do the same thing with these, using old rusted garden tools as a form of art. I think it would be a fun Mother's Day gift idea, especially if you helped her design and place these as artistic embellishments in her garden shed. Okay, let's move on to the next idea. Now, this would be my number 6 recommendation, but before I explain what it is and how I might use it, let me talk a little bit about Goodwill stores, junk stores, thrift stores in general. Now, a lot of you make comments that I must have a good Goodwill store, or that your Goodwill store is really pricey and is more like an antique store, or you kind of question the motives of some of your Goodwill locations. Well, I think it just depends on the nature of your own local Goodwill store. Mine happens to be inexpensive, it's close by, they've got a good mission. I can tell that the people that are working there are learning business skills. So it's something that I want to support and that is value centered. And so I guess you just need to know what your Goodwill center is like. I'm not going to pretend that I know how the organization functions, how it works, how it's decentralized around various locations. All I know is that my Goodwill store meets all of my ethical, value-centered, and aesthetic, and also economic considerations. So the next category would be, and I don't know how many of these I have bought, I may have mentioned it before, and that is old wooden cutting boards of any size, shape, variety, whether they're on a stand like this one, they've got little feet on them, whether they've got a handle, it doesn't really matter to me. Now, this is an aesthetic that's very easy to mimic if you want that farmhouse look or that popular Giannetti home look, where they have got layers upon layers of old wood cutting boards. Now, many of those are antiques. They might be very pricey. They might be extremely valuable. But if you're not in that high-end category and you want to replicate that look either in your garden or in your home, then I think just picking some up at Goodwill is a brilliant idea. Now, this one I'm using outside, and I kind of use it to protect the surface of this stainless steel table a little bit. But obviously, if you're going to use them inside, you might want to be more protective and more careful, and you might want to give them a good bleaching, a good washing. Maybe bleach isn't the best solution, that would probably damage it, but wash it really well with warm soapy water, and then give it a really good layer of mineral oil, something that will protect it, that you can apply over and over again. That moisturizes it. It definitely gives it an updated, darker look, and it's something that you might want to do to beautify it if you're using it indoors. Now, how would I gift it? Well, I think it would be really fun to take something like this, get a baguette, some cheeses, all sorts of fruits and things, and then go to your mother's house, your mother-in-law's house, or even the mother of a friend, and present her with an absolutely beautiful display, a charcuterie board on one of these old wooden cutting boards. Now, if someone was bringing this to me, I might also recommend a really nice bottle of rosé. Now let's move on to the next one. Another category that I tend to migrate to when I go into any kind of junk store, and that's enamelware, either in white or some other kind of interesting color. This is an old blue enamelware bucket. I actually love this light blue color, and what I also like about it, and what you will often find at these junk stores, is that there's a hole in the bottom. There's a hole in the bucket, dear Ida. What's that? Liza. Thank you, dear Liza, dear Liza. There's a hole in the bucket, and I look for those kinds of things. So I think this one would be so fun to present as a gift, and I think nothing would look more charming in it than one of these peachy color coral geraniums. I think that's fun. Plus, geraniums remind me very much of my mom. So I think that would be a fun gift. Any type of enamelware that you can put something celebratory in. Both my mother, I as a mother, and Liza would appreciate it, I think. So now let's move on to the next category. Now here is a really special surprise for you guys, and a very sentimental one to me. I had two mothers, and I've lost both of my mothers. My first mother died at 36, and a couple of years ago I lost my second mother, but there are compensations, and so I often borrow a mother from Stuart. So I want to introduce Susu. This is Stuart's mom. She's the one who came to my rescue singing the bucket song and knew that it was dear Liza and not dear Ida who had the hole in the bucket. And she is often here on our set. She's often here when we are shooting. And if you ever see me talking to someone in the background, or you see a figure maybe moving in the background, that would be Susu. She is very much a lovely surrogate mother, and Stuart very generously lets me borrow her. So I want to talk about my next idea, which may be one of my favorite ideas of all time, because it's something that I did with my kids very specifically for a Mother's Day gift years ago. We did this as an idea to gift something to my husband's mother that they called Mamu, and we came up with this idea. They discovered them, and then we packaged them in this way to give it to her as a gift, and we went out rock hunting. So what we did, this was actually down near Beaver's Bend in southern Oklahoma, and we got some gorgeous quartz pieces of rock, and we turned them into bookends. Now this idea was inspired by this absolutely gorgeous bookend that we got as wedding gifts from my husband's best man over 30 years ago, and I thought it would just be a fun idea to make our own version of that. So my boys, I have two boys, they went out hunting for these large quartz crystals. We have, subsequent to that, we would go out and we would find all sorts of really beautiful rocks and stones, anything that we might find as archaeological or just interesting natural sculpture. We would use them inside, we would gift them, and then whatever it was, I would just take one of my favorite handy helpers and I would put these felt glides on them, and then they could use them, whoops, they could use them as a bookend. And you do, obviously you need to make sure that you get the little felt glide in the place where it makes contact with the table. But this was one of the more fun adventures I went on with my kids. I think it's a great idea, especially if money is in short supply. And I do want to point out that as a Mother's Day gift to myself, because you have probably noticed, I'm not even going to be embarrassed about it. I'm just going to show my bad. Look at this. I'm going to give myself a manicure or get a manicure for Mother's Day. This started out looking pretty good, and then, I'm sorry, I had gardening to do, and this is what it looks like now. So as a Mother's Day treat to myself, please put in the comments below if this has ever happened to you. You have a manicure and then you immediately go out and ruin it because you had some 911 gardening to do. This happens to me frequently. So let me know if you're going to treat yourself to a Mother's Day gift this year. Let me know if some kind of personal grooming might be on that list. Okay, now let's go to another category of things you might find at the thrift store. Now, I love this idea, and apparently the people at Apartment Therapy did too, because they just recently listed it in one of their blogs as a category of things to look for at the secondhand store when you're outfitting your bathroom. These actually came from my mother. She used to collect teacups, porcelain teacups, some of them antique, some of them not expensive or valuable at all. I liked all of these, and I have a number of them because they all look like they belong to the same family. They all have the same kind of gold detailing on them. Some of them look like they might be little cream pitchers. Others of them are tiny little teacups. But I use these in my 1932 bathroom cabinet, and they hold toiletries. So I've got toothpicks in here. I have Q-tips. I have small makeup brushes. I might have some razors in here. Any of the type of thing that you would have in your medicine cabinet that would fit very tidily and very neatly in these little porcelain cups. It actually makes my medicine cabinet look kind of fun, and more importantly, it reminds me of my mom every time I open the cabinet door. So that would be a fun gift. Get some of these matching teacups, fill them with really fun things you think mom would like. And now let's move on to my final thing. Well, as always, the best gift you can give anyone, whether it's your mother, mother-in-law, your child, your spouse, your best friend, is the gift of your time. And so if you are able to take your mom to a garden, to a public garden, a private garden, the garden of a friend, a local nursery, let her pick out her own flowering Mother's Day gift. That, I think, is the most special thing of all to do. This week I had a surprise visitor, someone who follows me from the south side of Oklahoma City, and she texted me and asked if she could bring her mother by, who was visiting here from Mississippi. They both came by, we talked gardening, they roamed around my garden, we shared seeds, we shared our trials and tribulations of gardening. It was an absolutely wonderful morning. So if you have the opportunity to treat your mother to your time, your attention in someone's garden or your own, then that would be probably the thriftiest and the best Mother's Day gift that she could get. Happy Mother's Day, everyone. And by the way, all of these ideas would work for any kind of gift for a loved one in your life.